What shall the bedtime story be about tonight? Let me think. I know. I'll tell you about Mitzi, the mischievous kitten. Mitzi was born in a doll's pram. It was Joan's doll's pram. When Mitzi was born, she was a tiny ball of brown fluff, but she soon grew into a small, tabby, striped kitten. Joan had lots of cuddly toys, but none of them were so soft and warm as Mitzi. Joan loved Mitzi. Instead of taking her doll for walks, Joan would take Mitzi, who would lie in the pram, peeping over the pale blue cover, purring happily. Joan would play with Mitzi all day long. Her favourite plaything was a cotton reel, and sometimes Joan would thread a piece of string through it and hold it up over Mitzi's head and twirl it round, and Mitzi would jump up and try and catch it. She looked so pretty when she did this. She was such a playful kitten. She also liked playing with the cotton reel on the floor. She would bat it with her paws and chase it as it rolled under the chairs. But the day came when Joan had to go to school, and that morning she didn't have time to play with Mitzi. Everyone seemed to be rushing around, and Joan sounded cross, and she said, "Oh, go away, Mitzi." Presently Mitzi heard the front door slam, and she jumped up onto the window-sill and saw Joan run down the garden path and get into her daddy's car. She hadn't even said goodbye. Now it was Mitzi's turn to feel cross. She stalked out of the room into the hall. She went into the kitchen, and the back door was open, so she went out into the garden and sharpened her claws on one of the trees. She sat on the lawn and began to wash herself. Perhaps that would make her feel better. Her rough pink tongue licked the fur on her back. She was just wetting her paw in order to wash her face when she saw something jumping about in one of the trees. It was a squirrel. Then she saw another squirrel. They were chasing each other. Mitzi sat and watched them and decided she'd like to join in. So she walked across to the bottom of the tree and called up to them. "Meow, meow, meow. I want to come and play," she said. But the two young squirrels took no notice of her, so Mitzi began to climb up the tree. The two squirrels watched her. "Whoever's that? She looks a bit like us. But what a skinny tail she has." They laughed as Mitzi climbed higher and higher. "How slow she is," they said. But at last Mitzi reached the branch the two squirrels were sitting on. Mitzi had never climbed so high in all her life. You see, she had only just started climbing trees. She looked down. Ooh, how high up she was! She let out a little scream. "Meow!" "What's the matter?" asked the squirrels, and one of them ran along the branch and flicked his bushy tail in Mitzi's face. "Come and play," he said. "Try and catch me." Mitzi forgot all about being frightened, and she started to chase the squirrel along the branch. He leapt onto another branch. Could she do that? She crouched, ears back, then sprang with all her might, sailing through the air. Her front paws reached out, and she just managed to clutch hold of the branch and haul herself up. She looked round. Where had the squirrels gone? She couldn't see them anywhere. She peered through the leaves of the tree, and then she heard a laugh. She began to walk along the branch very carefully. It was a long branch, and it began to wobble, and Mitzi nearly fell off. Then she saw swinging on the end one of the squirrels. He was laughing at her, and Mitzi lashed her tail from side to side, and she took a flying leap. So did the squirrel. He landed safely on another branch. Poor Mitzi didn't. She waved her paws wildly as she fell, but nothing could save her. She went splash into the goldfish pond. Down, down she went under the water. What a dreadful sensation! And what a fright she gave the fish! Spluttering and choking, Mitzi struggled in the water. Then her paws touched something firm. Her sharp claws clung onto the edge of the pond, and she managed to scramble out. She lay on the grass, wet and bedraggled, and she could hear the squirrels laughing at her, and one of the goldfish popped his head up and he laughed too. When Joan came back from school for Mitzi, she saw her lying stretched out in the sun, and she picked her up in her arms and gently stroked her. Mitzi began to purr. Her troubles were over. Joan was home. Soon she was fast asleep. Now it's time for you to go to sleep. Good night. A story about Mitzi the mischievous kitten. I'll tell you what happened when Mitzi ran away. Joan had gone to school as usual, and Mitzi had followed her down as far as the gate and watched her being driven away in the car. The gate had been left open, and Mitzi peered round the gatepost, so that just her 2 eyes, her nose, and her whiskers were showing. Then she trotted out into the street. Mitzi had no idea where she was going, but she had a funny feeling inside her, a wild sort of feeling, a feeling of adventure. She hadn't gone far, sitting on the fence, a large black cat, with a smudge of white across his forehead. The cat sprang down off the fence and landed beside her. "Meow. I've been wanting to meet you," he said in cat language. "My name is Smudge." "Meow. I'm Mitzi," and Mitzi gave a sudden leap into the air. There was something about Smudge that she rather liked. Smudge rubbed himself against her. "Meow. I want to go somewhere exciting," said Mitzi. "Follow me," said Smudge. Mitzi trotted along behind him. "I've run away," she thought. A leaf fluttered down in front of her, and the wind blew it along, and she dashed after it and batted it with her paws, and Smudge joined in. Then they chased a bit of paper, and Smudge led her round corners, over walls, into gardens, and then he jumped down into a busy street with lots of people. There were legs everywhere, hundreds of them. Poor Mitzi was bumped and kicked, and someone trod on her tail. She let out a squeal of anger. "Meow." "Keep close against the wall," said Smudge. Mitzi pressed herself up against the wall, and suddenly she heard a sound more frightening than anything she'd heard before. It was a dog barking. Mitzi's fur stood right up on end. She arched her back, as she saw racing towards her an enormous dog. She looked round for Smudge. He had vanished. She fled across the road, just missing the wheels of a car. Then she saw an open door, and she darted through it. It was a greengrocer's shop. Mitzi slipped through to the back, where there were lots of sacks and boxes. She jumped up onto one of the boxes, and next to it was a sack half filled with potatoes. She peered down inside it. She would be safe in there, she thought. Still trembling, she jumped into the sack and curled herself up on top of the potatoes. But Mitzi wasn't allowed to stay there for long. "Fetch another sack of them taters," called a voice, and Mitzi felt herself being lifted into the air and being bounced about, bumpety, bumpety, bump. Then she was thrown right out of the sack with all the potatoes tumbling on top of her. "Blimey, there's a kitten. Must have been in the sack. Here, Puss, 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 come here, Puss, Puss, Puss." A hand stretched out and tried to get hold of her, but Mitzi was too quick. She dashed out of the shop and raced away up the street. She did wish she hadn't run away. She ran down the street and up another. She skidded round a corner and went helter-skelter, bang, slap into another cat. They rolled over and over, and then she saw that it was Smudge. "Oh, Smudge, take me home, please. Meow." Smudge felt very sorry for her, and he took her safely home. How pleased she was to see her own garden with the goldfish pond. She ran across the lawn. Smudge sat on the fence and watched her. "Meow, meow." "Goodbye," called Mitzi. Then she ran back and looked up at Smudge. "Dear Smudge, thank you for bringing me safely home," she said. Smudge sat on the fence, purring happily. He was going to see Mitzi again. He liked Mitzi. She pranced back to the house, slipped in through the back door, and stole quietly up the stairs into Joan's room. And that was where Joan found her, curled up on the eiderdown, fast asleep. Now it's time for you to go to sleep. So close your eyes. Sweet dreams. Good night.